Test, please.
Yes, 1212. Good day, everybody, and welcome to
Hi.
episode 5 of the
Well, today
podcast.
you join us from Queensland. So we've taken this on the road. Well, hey everybody, this is episode 5 of the Heaven Series podcast that we've been putting out through Andover Baptist Church over the last week or whenever you're joining from. And we hope that this is really helping you to dig deeper into the series that we're going through on Sundays at the moment. You can catch up on any of the series on our YouTube channel or come along in the building on a Sunday. We would love to welcome you. And we've been looking in this series about how what we believe about heaven makes a difference to how we live now and how we feel now as well, I guess. And talking specifically this week about the hope that is stored up for us in heaven and how that brings us hope for our lives right now. And I am here with Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Becky, good to be back again.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? We're
Yeah,
enjoying
yeah,
this.
I'm really, really enjoying it. I hope it's coming across well to other people, but
Mm.
yeah, I've been having a great time.
If nothing else, we had fun.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I've been learning loads as well from the conversation, from bits of the research that we did in
Mm.
preparation for this. So, yeah, I hope that's true for other people as well. But I certainly feel that way, that I've been thinking in a new way and learning new stuff as we've been going through
Great.
this. Yeah.
That's good. And we hope that's true for you as well if
Mm.
you're listening.
And no matter where you are on your spiritual journey, we hope that's true too, isn't it? Because you could be
Definitely.
exploring faith, and we hope this is giving you a little insight into maybe what Christians believe about what is to
Yeah.
come. But maybe that's inspiring for you too to carry on the journey of exploring faith.
Yeah, definitely. So, where are we going today, Chris?
Yeah, well, up until now, in the podcast episodes that we've done before now, we've been looking at some of the first followers of Jesus. So people who were influenced by him, either directly because they were with him or because they heard the stories about him. People like Peter and Paul. Today, we're going to go to Jesus himself. So, one of the things that I think can't help but notice when you read the stories of Jesus, that he had a clear view on what was coming. He had a clear view on the afterlife, on what happens when we die, and he had a very firm and solid belief in that, and he was keen to help other people understand that as well. So it's great that we're going to straight to him today to find out. So we're going to think about or listen to his words coming to us from kind of it's called a sermon, I guess. So a whole bit of teaching that he did that actually went on for quite a long time. It took a number of chapters in the New Testament to unpack all that he said there, or to log all that he said. It's called the Sermon on the Mount because Jesus was doing a sermon and it was on the side of a mountain, so hence the title. So Jesus has started his kind of 3-year period of ministry. He's been healing people and teaching people and all that kind of stuff, and that's led to like crowds of people wanting to come. They were attracted to him. There was something drawing them to him, and Jesus sees on a particular day, sees this whole crowd of people and goes up onto a mountainside so that he can address them, presumably because there were lots of them, lots of people flocking to see him. So we get an account of what happened that day from a guy called Matthew, who was a tax collector, who was called by Jesus to follow him, to be one of his disciples, and who was an eyewitness to many of the events of the life of Jesus. And then Matthew wrote this account of the life of Jesus, of the things that he'd seen in the New Testament part of the Bible. That's where we have it. So we're going to go to Matthew's account of that day, that sermon, that mountainside, and hear what Jesus had to say through
Great.
it. So you're going to read it for us?
Yeah, I'm going to read from this is Matthew 5, verse 1 to 12. If you want to follow along, you can just listen, or if you want to grab a physical or a digital copy of the Bible, we're in Matthew chapter 5. So here we go. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Great. Do you think there are a couple of words that we should just unpack a little bit there, just to make sure we're starting from a common understanding together? So, what do you think righteousness means?
Yeah, I think it's just a slightly fancier way of saying for doing the right thing and for pursuing goodness, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely good. And I think the other word, I don't know whether we use it so much these days, is meek. That's an
Mm.
interesting word for me. Do you think that is that humility? Is that people who perhaps not are in don't come out of like posh circumstances, or
Yeah.
is that the sort of thing that means? Do you think?
Yeah, I always hear it as humility, and particularly humility in the face of a circumstance that wouldn't necessarily naturally produce humility in you. So
Yeah.
people who are um, almost like oh, it's very difficult to put into words, Chris.
Yes, I think it's an easy word. I
Yeah,
think humility is
yeah,
probably the root of it, and
yeah,
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 yeah, I think that's good.
yeah. And we have this phrase kingdom of heaven being
Mm,
repeated.
mm.
Why does Jesus say kingdom of heaven, not just heaven, do you think?
Yeah, interesting. When I think of a kingdom, I think of somewhere where a king is ruling. That's what I think of, and so heaven is a place where God rules. And I also think when I think of kingdom, I think of a place where the ruler or the rules of that place are evident everywhere. You know, that's what shaped that situation. So when I think of kingdom of heaven, I think of a place where God is ruling and where there's evidence of that rule for the good and for the positive. So it feels like a really positive
Yeah.
kind of thing to me, and it's not just heaven because it implies to me a kind of a place or kind of a sweeping. I'm not explaining this very well, but it's kind of place or situation where there is this kind of ruling going on that's helpful and beneficial. I'm not sure I've
So it's
explained that
quite
properly.
tangible, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
And it's it's critical we see that in Jesus, heaven and the rule of God and things being God's way can't be separated.
yeah,
That and culturally we've done that a little bit, haven't we? We've got heaven with harps and clouds and good stuff, and it's in the way has been separated from God, remembering that if there's a heaven, it's because there's a God who's there and has
yes,
kind of set things up a certain way.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I guess that's another thing we're kind of doing in this series is bringing that sort of more romanticized version of heaven into the reality that Jesus set before people, which is this tangible reality where God is on the throne.
yeah. Yeah, and I think, and again, I think that's really important for what we're going to talk about today, which is that we can get glimpses of the kingdom of heaven when we see places and situations where God's will and purpose is evident around us, is evident in things that are going on. And our challenge for today, not trying to give away the ball game here, but our challenge for today is going to be about, can we be bringers of the kingdom of heaven into our situations now? This is not just something that happens some point in the future. We can see the kingdom of heaven breaking in to our world and to our lives today, and that happens when God is on the throne, when something that God would purpose and will for us is coming into being. And I think that's going to be really important. So that language of kingdom, I hope, helps us understand that sort of breaking in of the purposes and will of God today, as well as ultimately in its ultimate form in this kind of heaven and earth joining together thing we've been talking about as this picture of heaven going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're using these 5 questions to help us get to the bottom of everything that we're looking at over this series. And first question is, what is the context? I think you talked really well about the context of why Jesus gets up and gives this sermon. I just wonder if it's worth picking up a bit more on the people that are listening to Jesus as he says these things.
Yeah.
Why do you think these words are so important, spoken into the context that Jesus was speaking into?
Well, that's such a great question, and such it'd be a great insight for us to imagine who's there that day. So, there are regular people, and I think that's really important. There are people there who weren't wealthy or powerful. There were people going about their everyday lives. They may well have been, and there were people there who were downtrodden, who were persecuted, who were on the rough end of society and culture, the poor, those in need. There would have been well educated and completely uneducated people there. So there's this kind of whole mix. But I think that's really important because Jesus was known as a teacher or a rabbi in the Jewish language. And typically a rabbi wouldn't be addressing people who in those days would have been considered on the margins of society or not worthy, the people who were poor or weren't religious or weren't well educated or whatever. But Jesus has this whole range of people who are wanting to engage with him, who are wanting to hear what he's got to say. So the audience, the people who are there listening to this day, it's really important. It's important for us to recognize it wasn't your typical rabbi congregation. This is a whole mix of people, and I think that's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and even further than that, they are not the people who would consider themselves blessed
No.
or who anybody else at the time, and particularly religious leaders at the
Yeah.
time, would have said are
Yes.
blessed, are
Yeah.
have God smiling on them,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
have received favor
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
God.
There's an old, it may be a guy called Ignatius, one of the sort of known as one of the fathers of the early church, may have been him, I think, who had this kind of encouragement to people when they wanted to really understand the power and impact of the words of Jesus or a Bible passage, or whatever it was, to imagine themselves as somebody in the story. And I just think here, this is really interesting. Imagine that you're the kind of person, you're just scrabbling around trying to make ends meet. Maybe you're a subsistence farmer, or just all you can do is grow the stuff to feed your family. Even that might be a struggle. You're the kind of person, you've not been to school. You've been told all your life you're not really worthy, or you don't mean anything. You've certainly, as you said, nobody's ever said to you, you're blessed, or
Mm.
you can be, known by God, and all of that kind of stuff. Imagine you being that person in this situation. You've heard about Jesus. The news has gone around. You don't have TV or anything like that. So when somebody's sort of rumors are going around about somebody, you go out and you listen to them, and you go out and you see this kind of figure up on a mountainside, and he starts by saying, blessed, you're blessed, you're important, you're significant, you have value, you have worth, and all these amazing things that you read for us. You're going to inherit the earth. The kingdom of God belongs to people like you. You're going to be called a child of God. I mean, that must have just been absolutely mind-blowing for them.
Yeah. Wow.
And I imagine, imagining yourself in the story can just really kind of bring it to life
Yeah,
like that.
what a great habit to get
Yeah,
into, actually.
yeah,
That really
yeah.
does
I hope I've got
ground
that
it.
right. It
Yeah.
may well not be Ignatius,
Yeah.
but I think it was. But
It's a good idea, whoever came up with
whoever came up with
it.
the idea is a good one.
So we've definitely talked about what's the context. What about what's the point? What is Jesus communicating to people?
Yeah. Well, I think he in this talks about two different situations that people might be finding, and the same person might be experiencing both of these in their lives. But he talks and gives a list, if you like, of different struggles or attacks people might be facing or have faced. So he talks about people who are mourning, talks about people who are being persecuted, talks about people who are poor in spirit, those kind of things. So he clearly is talking to people, starting with this list of people who may be struggling, but then he's also, I think, talking to characteristics of people who might be trying to do the right thing when it comes to a relationship with God. People who are trying to be meek and humble, people who are hungering and thirsting for righteousness, trying to do the right thing, people who are showing mercy, who are being merciful, who are trying to be pure in heart, who are trying to be peacemakers. So he also lists a bunch of people who are trying to do the right thing. And I think Jesus is saying here that the key point is both those sorts of people can be blessed. So if you're going through difficulties, there's a blessing for you from God and from the promises that God makes. And if you're trying to do the right thing, if you're trying to live a life in connection with God, when you're displaying those qualities, actually the kingdom of heaven is breaking in on earth. So if you're struggling, the kingdom of heaven is awaiting you and giving you a hope and a fortitude to get through your struggles. But if you're doing the right things, if you're trying to exhibit those qualities of mercy and peace and all that kind of stuff, actually you're bringing heaven into the now. And I think for me that's the key point of what he's trying to say here. Does
Wow.
that similar thing strike you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love that it's these two camps of people. One camp who can't do anything about their
Yeah.
circumstances, and it's like, here's how to think of your situation, and here's how to respond to your situation when you can't control your circumstances. And then he broadens it out to, and here's how to respond, and here's how to think about your situation when you get to choose how to respond,
Yeah.
no matter like whether you're in good circumstances or not. That here's the option I want you to choose, no matter what's going on. I want you to choose mercy. I want you to choose purity of heart. I
Yeah.
want you to choose the option of making peace rather than creating conflict.
Yeah.
And then this, again, I think this is the thing that's really kind of recurring in my mind over and over as we go through these episodes. They will be comforted. And it's this absolute certainty of what is, like, Jesus spoke with total certainty about the fact that there would be a change in the order of things and that God would act in a new way in the future to take care of these people who have been in these circumstances or who have responded well to what life's thrown at them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that point, actually. That's so good, so insightful, uh, that there are people here who are in control of their
Mm,
circumstances and who aren't in control of their
mm,
circumstances, and both have the opportunity to be blessed and to display
yeah.
the kingdom of heaven at
Yeah.
work. That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And again, I think that, sorry, I'm
mm,
interrupting, but I think we keep saying that there's that looking forward as Jesus does with his absolute certainty to what is coming. Great is your reward in heaven. You know, he's got again this absolute certainty that you reference, that there is this reward in heaven, and it's a great one. You know, it's not just, oh, you've got a reward in heaven. No, great is your reward in heaven. And again, we've alluded to that all this week, haven't we? That God is storing up, in some of the language of the previous days that we've done, some of the previous podcasts, this kind of reward, this glorious thing in heaven. Yeah, love it.
this is a curveball question, but what do you think Jesus means by that reward? What, like, are we thinking like you're going to get a bigger house or like
I sit here with the advantage of having um, done a talk on Sunday about this, and again, people can go back and check that out on our YouTube channel and all those different places on the podcast and that kind of stuff. So. One of the things Jesus says about heaven in a different place is he talks about rooms.
Mm,
I'm going to prepare in my Father's house. There are many rooms,
mm,
and it's this idea of home, I think, that really struck me from that. That, you know, when I don't know about you, but sometimes if I've been on a trip and I get home, I'm like, oh, this feels so good. I'm going to sleep in my own bed, you know, open my own fridge, watch my own telly, you know, all that kind of stuff, which is, you know, so there's a joy in home.
mm,
And that's like my joy when I've been away on a trip and I get home is just a
mm.
tiny glimpse of what God is. So for me, one of the great words and joys of heaven will be, it'll feel like home, like this is where I've always belonged. All those times I've kind of gone, do I belong here? Is this where I'm supposed to be? Or I don't feel like I fit in. All of that's gone,
Yeah.
because now I'm home in the most perfect and glorious way,
Yeah.
and just the most unspeakable joy, I think,
Yeah.
is what's promised. And as we talked yesterday, this renewal of this amazing world in which
Yeah.
we live, in its perfection,
Yeah.
and experiencing that, just, I mean, that feels pretty cool to me.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So we've been asking this tricky question. What's the tweet? What's the short version? What's the couple of sentences I could maybe share with somebody else about what Jesus is communicating here.
Yeah. Shall I go? Do you want to go
Yeah.
first? Have you got one? Like
I
right
am
there?
not.
Okay. Well, like, here we go. This is. I
Mm.
wondered this. The promise of heaven should inspire us to be the kinds of people who bring heaven to earth now.
Wow. I think we've peaked at the tweet. At the tweet, that's the best
It's
one
only
from this
taken
week.
5 days to work out the answer to the
Yeah.
what's the tweet.
Go on,
So,
say that one more time because I thought that
yeah,
was really
this is always the
encouraging.
problem.
Yeah.
I can never remember it. The promise of heaven should inspire us to be the kinds of people who bring heaven to earth now.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good.
Which for me leads on to the what's the difference question is, well, I think there's this encouragement to us, people who hold on to this hope of heaven. And actually, again, I think this is where somebody who would say, look, I'm not a Jesus follower, here would be my challenge to somebody saying, well, why don't you just do something, try something to bring some of this stuff into your situation, your environment, to the people around you now, and just see what that feels like. And just see what it might feel like to bring something that I would say is of God, but you might not, into your context now. And who knows what might happen as you do that. Those of us who are Jesus followers, I'd say, look, this is just an encouragement to us to be the kinds of people who bring heaven to earth now through acts of mercy and peacemaking, through being spiritually hungry, trying to live in a way that honors God and honors Jesus. And maybe if we're in one of those people in that situation and circumstance that we can't control, so we're being persecuted, maybe persecuted at work or persecuted for what we believe, or we're struggling right now, or we're mourning or we're grieving or whatever it might be, to try to hold on to the hope and the reward that awaits us in heaven as a way of sustaining us through the circumstances that we can't control now. So for me, that's the difference thing. And what an amazing kind of privilege to be invited by God to bring heaven to earth now.
Yeah.
In all around. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's an incredible purpose, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 So is there a what's next for us? Yeah.
Well, I think it's look out for opportunities to take a step. Maybe it's a courageous thing you need to do, a blessing you need to bring to somebody around. It could be something that's require some bravery from you, from me, but to step out and do something to see the kingdom of heaven come to your situation and circumstances now. Live out the purpose of God now, and catch that glimpse of what is to come for all of eternity. I mean, that's pretty amazing too.
Yeah. I'm sitting here looking at these words and thinking, I think what's next for me is I need to ask God for some help in some of these things. Because blessed are the pure in heart. I mean, like, I need help having a pure heart sometimes.
Yes.
And like, a lot of these things go against our natural inclination. And blessed are the peacemakers. I mean, sometimes I quite enjoy giving people a prod, stirring up some mild confrontation. So I think I need to ask God to begin to transform me in some of these things, that he would make me more inclined towards being a peacemaker and being pure in heart, and that there's an incredible promise in that I'll be able to see him and know him as my heavenly Father when I do that.
Yeah.
So,
I know. Yeah, absolutely. Take that, and I think that's true for all of us, isn't it? Yeah. But I think I can think of moments in my life, and there are not enough of them, so this is not a blow my own trumpet or anything like that. But maybe when something's happened where I've shown some mercy to somebody else, or compassion, or kindness, or love, or I've tried to diffuse a conflict or whatever, and I've come away from that thinking something happened there. And again, we might put different language around it depending on where we are in our spiritual journey and all that kind of stuff. But I think I saw God in that moment.
Yeah.
When I've just done something to help somebody out in need, and you catch a glimpse in their face of what that means to them. I think that's God. I think you're seeing something of the kingdom of heaven breaking in there, and then we are seeing God. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's
one of the incredible things about following Jesus. And if you have not begun a journey of following Jesus yet, then it's one of the things that is maybe worth trying out, is that it shouldn't work, but it does. Like it feels like it shouldn't work to show mercy to somebody and actually that, who's actually really wronged you
Yeah.
and that produce a better outcome.
Yeah.
And yet it does,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that actually, as we begin to put these things into practice, we're almost like, we're just trying it out.
Yeah.
Like, does Jesus's way work?
Yes.
And yeah, I can't think of a single time in my life where it hasn't
Yeah.
worked better when I've gone with Jesus's way rather than my own.
Yeah. 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 There's a whole nother podcast series
Yeah.
there, I reckon,
Yeah.
of trying things the Jesus way,
Yeah.
even when we don't think that works.
Yes.
I reckon there's a whole nother
I
podcast
like that.
series we
Yeah.
could do there one day. So yeah, I think that's great. And I would love to hear the stories. I don't know about you, but again, through our social media channels or direct messaging us or whatever, how amazing would it be if some of our podcast listeners got in touch with us and said, as a result of listening to that podcast, I went out and asked for forgiveness from somebody I'd wronged, or gave forgiveness to somebody who had wronged me, or delivered a meal to people down the road from me who I know were going through a tough time, or whatever it might be. You can think of a million one things. Our listeners are clever enough to think that of those things, but then just to tell us the story of what happened when they did that would be amazing.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
be really
That
cool.
would be really cool. Well,
Great.
folks, I think that brings us to the end of the first week
Yeah,
of this
can't believe
podcast
it.
series.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we really hope this has been an encouragement to you. Stay tuned and check in with the next message in this series.
Yes.
Time is so confusing now if you're listening to this on demand, but there will be, or there was another talk to go as part of this Heaven series, and you can catch up with that on YouTube or come in the room on Sunday. And we'll be back with more podcast episodes continuing on this theme.
And next week we're going to talk even more about what will heaven be like, and what hope can that grow in us. So
I can't wait.
Yeah, it should be good. Thank you.
Good. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you, Becky.